Hi, I'm Edward Goodwin. I used to be a final designer, an associate final designer on Hearthstone, but now I'm an associate initial designer on Hearthstone.
Hi, I'm CORA. I also used to be an associate final designer on Hearthstone, but now I'm a game designer on initial design, and I was also the set lead for Murder at Castle Nathria.
I'm so glad you mentioned that you're a set lead on this, Cora, because the setting for this expansion is like unlike anything I've seen in the game to this point. And you've mentioned that you've been working on the set for about a year. So I have to ask where the concept came from. Did it come over a game of Clue, or like how did this idea come about?
I'm a shameless mystery fan. I love murder mystery novels, movies, TV shows. I love escape rooms and games of deduction. So this is actually something that I've wanted to do for quite some time. In every brainstorm that we have done since I've joined the team, I have suggested murder mystery, and it was always like right up near the top, but it didn't quite cut it. So when it came time for me to lead my first set, I made sure to whisper around the team, put the thought in a couple people's ears, just like, wouldn't it be cool if we did a murder mystery set? Like, that would be really sick. And then when it came time to brainstorm, I was like, yeah, we should do that. And then I had a bunch of people be like, yeah, that would be really cool. And it worked.
What do we know about all the suspects? And are all of them going to introduce a quirky new mechanic into Hearthstone? Because what we've already seen from Murloc Holmes and from Prince Renethal is that they've brought some unique effects that we haven't really seen in the game before.
Yeah, it's always fun when we can do new things in Hearthstone. As far as each of the suspects, I will say that they all are, for the most part, pretty synergistic with their locations. It was, theme-wise and lore-wise, it made sense for us to have, the suspect and their location work together. And then each suspect also has a covenant spell in their respective class that is appropriate for the class and covenant of the suspect. So for instance, Vaj is a Necrolord shaman, so she has Primordial Wave, which you saw already. And all of those art pieces will feature the suspects in them. So that's sort of our, we thought about doing murder weapons. Obviously, the classic trope is suspect location weapon. But we just did the profession tools in United and Stormwind when we had started making this set. So we didn't necessarily want to go down the route of weapons for every class just yet. So we decided on covenant spells instead.
And is guesswork and deduction going to be a recurring mechanic across other cards in the expansion?
I can answer that. Yes. One of my favorite cards in the expansion is Suspicious Usher, and there will be a lot of different cards that are playing around a little bit with deduction. If I can talk to that card really briefly. So Suspicious Usher says Battle Cry, discover legendary minion, and then your opponent gets a chance to guess which it is, and if they guess right, they get a copy of it. I think when I had a chance to sit down and play with that mechanic for the first time, it was maybe the most fun I've had in Hearthstone in a long time. So, I think the guesswork and deduction in this set is going to be a lot of fun for players. I can't wait for more of these types of cards to be revealed.
Yeah, Suspicious Usher actually, I think, was the first card created in this set. Its card ID is something like REV_000. And it was Liv Breeden, actually, who had said, this is something I've wanted to try for a long time. Let's just try it. And I'll admit, at first, I was like, why would we want a discover effect that gives our opponent a card too? Like, that seems counterintuitive. But the mind games of it makes it really fun. And the fact that we were able to stat all of these cards, there were 3 of them, by the way, 3 suspicious cards, that we were able to stat them all pretty well means they're actually very usable and they're really fun.
We did see a single player component added to the last expansion in the Book of Heroes. Are we going to expect to see something along those lines with this new expansion? And will that let you really dive into the whole murder mystery / escape room type of atmosphere?
I have seen so many people asking about this, and it's not something that I can speak to, and obviously I'm not going to give anything away. But I will say that, our narrative team just finished up with Book of Heroes and Book of Mercenaries, which was a significant undertaking for 2 members of the team in particular, Val and Matt London. Val just completed the Book of Phelan, and that was awesome. And so, if they want to do some other styles of content, I think that is totally great for them at this time. We will have some companion stuff to go along with this set. It's too cool of a story not to, I think, dig into a little bit more. But I'm not going to give anything away.
So I love that locations have become a new playable card type in Hearthstone. And given the sites that we've seen across Azeroth over the years, is it safe to assume that this card type will probably stick around beyond this expansion?
Yes, I think that is a totally safe assumption to make. Whenever we make a new card type, there's a lot of undertaking from various different teams, so we have to be quite confident in the idea. And in this case, we are. So we have this new card type. We're going to use it in the future. I imagine that it will be used sparingly. I don't think it'll come up at the same rate as like spells or minions, for instance. But it's definitely going to be something that's going to stick around in Hearthstone for years to come.
So
it was.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, it was important to us with locations that we have room to grow with them. Spells didn't start out as legendary spells. Weapons didn't start out as legendary weapons. And we like to add complexity to our card types over time. So with locations, we really wanted to establish these are the rules of locations. This is how they work. This is how you play with them, and make sure that everybody has experience with that before we break those rules in the future. So you will see locations going forward. But for now, they are sort of the introductory version. They're all very synergistic within their classes. They're all these really wonderful, exciting places that our investigator Murloc Holmes will visit throughout Castle Nathria. And yeah, we have some exciting things we want to do with them over time.
And what are some of those ways that you can see locations evolving over time? Like what are some like interactions or some sort of things that you'd love to do with this card type?
No, I mean, I'm not going to speculate on design work that we haven't done yet. But I think I'll let our players run with the imagination. We've established 1-turn cooldown. We've established finite durability. There's a lot of knobs that we can turn and a lot of things that we can do to make more exciting, more complex versions of these, for sure.
Is there a particular location card that you would love to maybe see in the future?
Yes, but I feel like that's giving away places that we want to go to in Hearthstone's future. This is very tricky. I see what's going on here. Yes, there are, and I don't think we can really talk to them because it might be giving away things to come down the road.
He's got your number, Ozzy. Watch out. He knows. He's on to you.
We're trained.
The suspicion starts now. How very in theme.
They are trained detectives. I know that much.
Yes, you have to guess.
Suss out a leading question whenever we see one.
Yeah,
there's so many cool places in World of Warcraft. I think Castle Nathria was a really excellent place to start because players got to visit different rooms of Castle Nathria in the raid, right? But they were, I went and looked through game footage and in game, and they're all pretty sparse. They're all just sort of these blank slate locations where the raid fight happens. But, at a dinner party, in an inhabited castle where you're inviting guests, what could these rooms really look like if they're decorated, if they're gussied up, if they're elegant and dramatic, because that's very much the vibe of the Venthyr and of Sire Denathrius. So it was a really fun sort of way for us to visit established locations in World of Warcraft and put our spin on them.
Is this going to give us some insight to what happened before the betrayal of the Venthyr's Lord? Is it going to give us like a little bit more like kind of like a prequel vibes to what happened before we're in the Shadowlands? Like, where does it take place in the WoW timeline?
We are intentionally vague about that at times, I think. It's no secret that players know what happens in Shadowlands. They know how the story ends. So for us to come in and say, we want to throw a wrench into the story of Sire Denathrius is a little weird, because it seems like, we can tell players, well, this is what's happening here, and they can automatically challenge us with, well, but this is what actually happens. Like, we know what happens. So I think in my headcanon, it is before, obviously, because everybody's here. Pelagos is not the arbiter. We've got all these characters. It's the before time, but it's a really sort of shadowy, not necessarily well-defined time.
Take it with a grain of salt, is like with Hearthstone. Like their
Yeah,
stories are like
exactly.
one-shot off stories that are supposed to be fun. Yeah, so like don't take them too seriously. Don't be like, well,
Is
actually, in
Murloc
episode
Holmes
6,
actually deceased, and that's why he's in the Shadowlands? Like, there's a lot of things that we can sort of get away with because, you know, we're Hearthstone, and we like to play with the World of Warcraft timeline, and we want to ultimately enhance World of Warcraft lore with our expansions, but we don't like to be too serious about it.
So I'm going to ask this because I've experienced this for myself already, but Prince Renathal can take a deck that feels a little iffy, maybe borderline, but by adding 10 extra cards, it feels a lot more complete. So what decks have you seen what decks have you seen so far that may have just felt okay, but now feel a lot more competitive now that you can add 10 extra cards?
Yeah, so one deck that's been popping up recently that I think has been using Renathal quite well is Lady Prestor Druid, where you run a bunch of cheap minions and Lady Prestor, and a couple ways to find Lady Prestor, like capture Coldtooth Mine, and then you turn all your deck, like all the minions in your deck, into these random, you know, legendary epic dragons at very cheap costs. And that was actually one of my pet decks before this expansion. I used to play that a lot in Voyage to the Sunken City, and you often just ran out of cards. You draw so many cards so quickly that you'd sit there with 30 cards through an empty deck and be like, I wish I had 10 more dragons. So Renathal really does a great job of solving both of those issues that Dex has, which I think is really fun, because when we were playing Renathal, we were often doing it in the slightly slower more like control-oriented decks. Is mainly where we were playtesting it. So, you know, it's really fun to see how players take these cards and use them in new and innovative ways. Renathal is definitely one where there's like tons of exploration still to be had. I wonder how it looks, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, how players really use it. So yeah, I think that's the main deck that's been on my radar.
Quest Priest.
Which priest?
Quest Priest.
Oh yes, I think Quest Priest is on the ladder too. So many more. There's so many more cards you can fit into a Quest Priest, and yeah, I've seen it a lot myself. I've seen so many decks that just I wouldn't see on ladder before, that now that they can fit in a few more cards, that now they're all over the place. Like between that, like myself, I've added some control options to like the Abyssal Priest, and just it's been amazing to see. And now I want to move on to going on Prince Renathal. I actually noticed this watching one of Tice's videos a couple nights ago, but now that potentially both players can have 40 cards in their deck, games can run a lot longer. So do you expect the average Hearthstone game to go slower, or was that maybe an unintended side effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, if players start with more health, they end up, like, games will often take longer, especially if everyone's trying Renathal at once. I think part of that is, you know, Renathal is a card that benefits these control type strategies, but also, you know, it's a new, you know, game shifting card that everyone really wants to get their hands on. So I think part of it is just the novelty of Renathal. You know, when everyone's playing with it and trying out these weird, wacky control decks, the games are going to tend to be on the longer side. So, you know, it's definitely something we had in mind. I wonder how it looks, you know, even a couple weeks from now, if that trend continues. You know, it's going to be something on our radar. We don't want games to take forever. You know, we want you to be able to have that Hearthstone experience where it's not an hour to play a single game. But for now, we're just going to let it ride, see what happens. Players seem to really like the card. So, you know, we'll see a couple weeks from now.
Yeah, and I think for what it's worth, a lot of these decks that you're putting Prince Renathal in do sort of still have defined win conditions. Even Prestor Druid, which, you know, the defined win condition is random dragons. Pretty consistently, you can find a Hollow Matron Protectorate with a combination of spells and be able to burn out the opponent. The Quest Priest obviously has the Purified Shard as the quest win condition. Abyssal Warlock has the curses. So we're not seeing 40 card fatigue matchups, I think, which is important. Because those certainly would be very long games.
It's really easy to take 40 cards for granted and just somehow run out of cards. That Tice video that I was referencing, like he got to a fatigue state and he's like, how did I run out of cards so fast? So yeah, I can see where that would be the case. So now I want to kind of sidestep the expansion itself and move into one of the bigger quality of life improvements that you added to Hearthstone. Now it's possible to interact with, challenge, and even report recent opponents. So what made this the right time to introduce that? And is the team planning a few more quality of life improvements in the near future?
That's a solid question. I think, this is something we wanted this for a very long time. And the question of when is the right time is always a matter of like resources. Where do our people best serve to make the game as good as possible? And with the development of how we do our pod structure in Hearthstone, we recently switched to Hearthstone pods. One of the big improvements, I think, has been the features team on the Hearthstone pod. Features has been like at work day in, day out, trying to make as many cool quality of life features that they can. One that came up in the .6, the 23.6, was the overcap decks, which, we want to do Renathal for 24, and features like, okay, let's also do this at the same time to make sure that Renathal is as fun as possible. So, I can't really speak towards what they're working on currently. I'm not as involved with the features team as I am with the design, like the card design team. But rest assured, they are working on tons of cool stuff to get in the hands of our players.
All right, and last question for me, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this, and I'd be remiss if I didn't try and ask one more leading question, but I have to ask about Sire Denathrius. He's definitely dead, right? This isn't going to turn out to be a fake out and he's actually alive, is it?
Ozzy, it's a murder mystery. It couldn't be a murder mystery if he was alive. That's ridiculous.
Of course. What am I thinking?
I don't know what to tell you. Mance is dead. He has been unalived unceremoniously by one of 10 horrid suspects.
Gotcha.
So yeah, obviously where lore comes in, this was a bit of a weird one for us to do because everybody knows what happens with Sire Denathrius, who has played through the Shadowlands campaign. So us coming in and intentionally saying, yeah, forget all of that, this is what's happening, is a little odd. I do think for the most part, we've gotten the response that we wanted, which is people have taken it at face value. They've said, this is what we're working with in Hearthstone. Now, what do I think is actually happening here? And I think that's the whole point of the expansion, is to let players sort of dig in and investigate and find out what they think is actually happening here. But yes, he has been murdered, and that is the whole basis for what we are doing here.
Cora, did you get to keep that magnifying glass at the end of the video?
I did.
Awesome. That's so great.
I bought it. Way too expensive. So I was not returning it.
That's so great. And okay, so Hearthstone Murder at Castle Nathria. When can we expect to see it?
You can expect to see it launching everywhere August 2nd, which is not that much earlier than previous expansions, actually. I've seen a lot of conversation about people saying this is much earlier, but it's about right in where we normally like to launch these second expansions of the year. And
when can we expect to see card reveals roll out?
You actually, great question. We've got the video with Leo Robles Gonzalez, one of our initial designers, and Brian Kibler coming tomorrow, which is going to be more of a locations deep dive. And you can expect to see some pretty sick cards in there. We've got, they're going to be playing a deck that has a, I will say, fan favorite legendary character in it. So that should be really fun. And then I think we've got some more, Edward, we've got esports reveals this weekend too, I think.
Yes, if you tune in to the Masters Tour, there's going to be several card reveals for that. So be sure to tune in, watch.
So Edward and Cora, how many murder mystery dinner parties have you had since the announcement or inception of this expansion?
That hopefully have not ended in murder.
That have not ended in murder.
Disappointingly 0. Okay.
0.
We did watch Clue. We did actually watch Clue all together one time. I think Cora might have watched it more, but
now I'm not saying that this expansion was inspired by any specific media or content. It was not. But we like to watch a movie with the team before we get into the design process for new expansions, and it was my choice this time to make sure that everybody had seen Clue at least once in their life, because a shocking amount of them had not. I
actually haven't.
I watched it for the first time 2 days ago, which is funny. The timing is hilarious. Yeah.
Which is so funny because we're the old people on the staff. And
yeah,
you'd think we'd have seen something like this by now. I know, right?
It's a shame. If you classic Tim Curry, there's a Clue reference in Hearthstone already. like one of the best quotes from the film is in Hearthstone already. So you would be doing yourself a disservice if you don't go watch it. But of course, lots and lots of novels and movies and TV shows went into inspiring this set. So it's not just that.